Well, everyone here, the kids are still awake and they're supposed to be in bed, and the cats are running around. So if we have interruptions, we just roll with it.
There you go.
Pretty much.
This is part of life.
Mm-hmm.
But hello, everyone. Welcome to Wine, Women, and Words. I am Michelle, and with me, of course, is Diana.
Hello.
And this is our first Book of the Month episode of 2023. And we have been reading Daughters of Victory by Gabriella Saab. And we actually haven't been discussing it this month, only because we realized, oh, it only came out on Tuesday. So we're like, well, we don't want to talk about it before anyone can read it. Because then that would have been like, that just would have been rude. But this is going to be like a whole huge book discussion. And obviously, if you're familiar with Wine, Women, and Words, there are spoilers. And there are many, many spoilers to discuss in this book. So if you have not finished reading it since you purchased it on Tuesday, pause it, bookmark this episode, and come back. Hello, puppy. And she's judging us already. The show just started.
I know, Lito, don't be so judgy.
So if you haven't finished the book, bookmark this and come back, because you've been warned and we do not apologize if you listen beyond this point. So all that to say, thank you so much for coming back, Gabriella. We're very excited to have you.
Thank y'all. I am so excited to be back.
So yes, you are still in pub week.
Yes, just a couple days ago.
Are you hydrating?
I'm trying. I've got Diet Coke. I don't know if that counts, but yeah, just trying to keep it together. It's been crazy and fun, and yeah, I'm excited. I'm glad it's finally here.
Well, this was the book that you had been working on when we interviewed you for the last Checkmate.
Yes, that is correct.
So it's been about a year. Has it only been a year? Gosh, the time.
Only a year. Yeah, Checkmate came out in October 2021, and I'd actually already sold Daughters of Victory like in September. So I was in edits or something probably when I was on with y'all.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so this, I mean, I guess we can really just kind of dive right into it as far as questions. We'll start easy. And just to get the inspiration behind.
Well, we should probably get the synopsis.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I guess we'll back up a little bit more. Just to give everyone a quick overview of the book that we're going to be discussing tonight, would you mind giving a quick synopsis of the story?
Sure. So Daughters of Victory is a dual timeline, dual point of view story that takes place between the Russian Revolution and the World War II Soviet Union. It's about a generation of women that are bound by the ties of family, but interrupted by the tragedies of war. So in the revolutionary timeline, you have a young woman named Svetlana, who is a former aristocrat who leaves her family to join the revolution. So when the story picks up, she's being released from political imprisonment, and she goes back to the city to rejoin her political party and seek vengeance for her uncle's murder, who is also involved in that party. And then you jump forward to the 40s in the Soviet Union, and you meet her granddaughter, who is a girl named Mila, who is sent out of Leningrad to live with her grandmother for protection ahead of the Nazi invasion that is rumored to about to occur. And as Mila joins the resistance in the 40s, she kind of inadvertently stirs up some long buried secrets from her grandmother's past.
So it's very, that was very practiced. It rolled off the tongue very easily.
I haven't had to do it too much yet, so I'm like getting into the habit. I haven't had to do it a whole lot yet.
So what was the inspiration for the book itself?
So I actually discovered part of the story while researching The Last Checkmate. So I was digging into a lot of just Eastern European people in the resistance, looking for inspiration for my characters for The Last Checkmate, which is World War II set in Poland. So I was looking at that World War II era of Eastern Europe in particular. And I discovered a girl named Zina Portnova, who was a young Soviet who lived with her grandmother during this Nazi invasion. in a little town in what is currently Belarus, and she infiltrated a Nazi garrison with the sole purpose and intention of poisoning those soldiers. So I thought that was a really fascinating story, but I didn't want to just repeat World War II again. So when I got to working on this concept, I looked up a different period of Russian history to try to find a tie there that I could join the stories with. And I discovered two women who served as inspiration for that main character. So those were a woman named Fanya Kaplan, who was accused of assassinating Vladimir Lenin, and then another woman named Vera Feiner, who used to be an aristocrat. She came from an aristocratic family, and she left her family to join a resistance group or a revolutionary party. So I thought those were two very fascinating women, and I kind of squished their lives together to develop the character in my book, Svetlana. And then her granddaughter in my story is inspired by Zina Portnova.
I love it.
I love all of the names that like you pay homage to all of the actual women that inspired the characters. I think that's wonderful.
Well, thanks.
When you said Zena, I was like, oh, like the woman in the kitchen.
That's why I named her that. That's exactly why she got that name.
So, you go.
Okay. Now, given that, both history nerds, we cannot start off this episode or get very far without discussing the research that you put into this. Russian history in and of itself during this time period, there's so much to sift through, and they're both very tumultuous time periods in Russia, especially in Leningrad. For those who aren't familiar, there's a huge siege of the city at that time period.
Yep. Yeah, so the research was a lot, and it was dense and heavy, and like you said, just sifting through everything to whittle down, first of all, to a manageable storyline that wasn't completely saturated in politics and in everything that was going on, and then one that made sense for the characters and for the storyline that I had, and like could be used to tie everything together in the ways that I wanted. It was a lot. It was difficult, and I was like forcing myself to do it half the time because it was just so dense and difficult and complex and just unlike anything I'd ever learned before, because I didn't know a whole lot about this time period other than kind of the basics that you learn in school or hear about, or things like that. So I didn't know about the different political parties during the revolution. I didn't know much about the siege taking place in Leningrad in the 40s, and so it was a lot of research up front, specifically with the politics. That was the thing where I focused the most because that informed my characters the most and it would influence them and their decisions and things like that. So it was a lot, but I hope it's done in a way that is true to the time, but also, manageable for the reader and makes sense and keeps you engaged.
Well, it was definitely, I knew, basically kind of like you said, like the not the highlights, but like the main points, but this was definitely like almost like a crash course in like the Bolshevism and all of the politics in, the early 1900s and Lenin's kind of rise. What was that basically his rise to power? And how did you, now once you had all of that research up front, how did you approach writing it and weaving it into like the dialogue and the setting without it becoming like a college lecture on Russian history in the early 1900s?
Well, I'm very much a plotter, so it was a lot of just planning on my planning documents and hashing out the real storyline and then my storyline and what needed to go where. But I was honestly working on that until like I turned in final edits, because when I turned it into my editor the first time, she was like, great, there's a lot of politics though. You need to like whittle it down. And so I was like, oh my gosh, fine. So it was constantly combing through and finding ways to incorporate some of that history that felt natural in like you said, the dialogue, the environment, what's taking place, without making you feel like I'm standing here lecturing you and giving you a textbook. So it was a hard balance to find, and just one I was constantly picking at and trying to make a little more seamless. And so, yeah, it was definitely a challenge for sure.
And how was that editing? Was there a lot of rewriting when you had to start combing through and cutting down?
It wasn't as much rewriting in terms of the political content. Like, most of that was there. It was more like I did more work, I think, on the characters themselves than I did the actual storyline. But it was more just like there's all this stuff going on between Russia and Germany at this time because World War I is going on. So I initially had a little bit more of that in there. And so we were like, okay, let's focus in a little more, because yes, that's interesting and that's informing what's going on, but we need to focus more directly on the Socialist Revolutionary Party and the Bolsheviks. That's the main conflict in this book. So we need to concentrate there. We can kind of sprinkle in some other things about what's going on with the imperial government or the Romanovs or World War I, but we need to focus in here. So that's really what kind of made me go in and be like, okay, I don't necessarily need this. I can weave this out. I can just throw this in as a quick throwaway line and not give you this whole giant paragraph that I had originally, and, stuff like that.
I imagine for historical fiction or historical writers, period, doesn't necessarily have to be historical fiction. But like historical fantasy, whatever.
Right.
It must be so such a difficult decision to decide, like, oh, but I really love this part and it's really interesting, but it doesn't necessarily drive the plot forward.
Exactly, because you're like, I spent so much time researching this, please let me keep it. And they're like, no. So it kind of hurts a little bit, but it's for the good of the story.
It's always funny how, when it comes to historical fiction, we will obsess over one little thing, one tiny, minute little piece of history that we will spend weeks, if not months, researching, and it can end up being just one sentence in the book.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then it'll get cut and copy edits.
Yes, because it's copy edits is that it's the necessary evil of all.
It
is.
So what is a scene that you really, really loved that never actually made it into the final version of the book?
Ooh, interesting. One scene, so if you've read the book, the first scene, or the first chapter, I guess, opens when Svetlana, my main character, is attempting to assassinate Lenin. Because for those who have read the book and who know the history, there's a lot of dispute over whether Fanya actually attempted to shoot Lenin or not. So to the history writer, that is the exact question we want, because we ask, what if it was someone else? So in my book, it's my character who makes that assassination attempt. And so the opening scene is her making that attempt and getting ambushed by someone you have not met yet, or you're as not identified yet, and shot. And so there initially, I had a parallel scene to that, because that's the opening scene. Then we flash back to Svetlana's earlier life and build back up to that moment. So originally, my second chapter was a parallel scene from Mila's point of view when she is also being shot by someone, which is a scene that is in the book later. And again, it was just kind of a mirrored chapter where the shooter wasn't identified. Mila's in, Moscow in this hotel room, mentions everything that's going on, and she's running from something, and she gets shot also. So I really liked having that kind of parallel between the two women's lives, and then flashing back to both their earlier lives and building back up to those moments, because those are scenes that do take place in the book later. But we ended up cutting the one from Mila's point of view because it wasn't as necessary, but I liked it a lot. So I still miss that sometimes.
Writers always have those scenes that you write that you're just like, oh, nailed it. This scene is gold, definitely going to make the cut. And
it was such a good opening line too for that chapter. I don't remember what it was, but it was so good, and I was so proud of it, and then I had to get rid of it.
Oh, writer's life.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're not diving right into spoilers, but
Okay.
I just have to say, like, there was definitely some fancy footwork in laying out all those plot twists.
Yes.
So I think this is a perfect segue into the plotter versus pantser discussion, because there was some serious plotting going on. How did you I wrote out my question. It was all great and I lost my stuff. Did everything play? Yeah, seriously. Did everything play out the way that you had envisioned it in your mind when you first started writing?
Yes, because I had to plot it so carefully to make it work. Because first, from a political standpoint, all the differences in the parties and the nuances of what they fought for and believed, I had to make sure all that was going to work with each character and their loyalties and all these other things. So in general, the gist of every plot twist was there from the get-go, but kind of how they unfolded was mostly the same. Now there was a little bit of discrepancy just in terms of character and ways things went down, but for the most part, it was all there up front because, as I said, I am such a plotter, and for this book especially, I had to be, because otherwise it wasn't going to work.
Now
I can see that.
Yeah, definitely. Now for what Michelle and I have noticed is I'm very much a plotter. However, and when it comes down to it, when it comes to my personal life, I'm okay with chaos. Chaos happens. Chaos has a nice cozy spot within my home. It is what it is. Michelle, on the other hand, is very much a pantser, but she does like to have everything nice and orderly. Now, the question that we're going to ask you, since you are a plotter, are you okay with chaos? Or you have to have everything nice and orderly?
I am okay with some chaos. It depends. Don't look at my desk back there, or you will see my chaos. Like for certain things in life, I'm very much a plotter. Like if I'm traveling, I like to know where I'm going and what's on the agenda and things like that. But yeah, like my workspace and other stuff, like I'm okay with the madness.
I kind of feel like you have to have some of that madness when you're doing the writing and you're putting all of this together.
Right. Because it's so strict and like, so measured out. It's like you've got to get your chaotic outlet somewhere else.
Exactly. And we have so much going on in our minds. What was it? Einstein who said a chaotic desk is a sign of a chaotic mind.
There we go.
Exactly. And we're writers. We have chaotic minds.
Yep, totally.
Yeah, like I think I've got some leftover like Christmas cards I never sent out over here on my desk.
Yep.
All the notebooks almost all the notebooks I've ever used.
Yep.
Some pens. All the things. Yeah, baby proofing for outlets. I got a box here on there. A bunch of random stuff.
Yeah. Thriving in chaos.
Like, what's that magazine thing that some magazines do? Like, what's in your purse for celebrities? Yeah. For writers, it's the what's on your desk.
Yeah.
That would be such a fun game. Let's start a series.
We should. That would be fun to do.
We should. Oh, okay. So Gabriella, what's on your desk?
Oh gosh. Okay. I've got a wine bottle opener. I have 2 bottles of wine on the floor from lunch. I have a tiny slinky that I kind of use like as a stress ball, like a little tiny plastic slinky. I have my grandfather's glasses. I have pictures. I have holy cards because you need all the prayers you can get when you're writing. I have pens, paper, stacks of research. What else do I have? Mugs, a portable charger. Like
it looks like a copy of The Last Checkmate's up there at the top.
Yeah, copy of The Last Checkmate. A couple more wine glasses. Lots
like the best game of I Spy ever.
Yeah, my Audrey Hepburn shrine is up there. Candles. Yeah, all sorts of good stuff. A pot that I killed the plant in, and I need a new plant. Rest in peace to my orchid.
Honey,
I tried to keep an orchid alive too.
Oh, I know. I tried so hard and just didn't work. Usually there's a Diet Coke can over there too, but I brought it to this side of my room with me.
Gotcha.
I need more fun stuff on my desk.
You do.
I don't have, I have notebooks and
There you go. Well, that's good.
and little mini post-it pads that I never ever use, but I feel like
yeah.
I will need.
Got some of those. Yeah.
Oh, those post-it pads are perfect for when it comes time to edit.
Yeah, those are nice.
Oh yeah, like I don't know about you. So we're gonna get into some nitty-gritty of the plotting and getting into things.
Yes.
What I like to do is I'll print out the whole book.
Oh, really?
And yes, I will do that.
gosh.
And I will read it like it's a story. And I have those post-it notes. Like I'll put them all over the place. I'll mark off on the paper where I want to change it. So when I'm and that's in the stage before it gets turned into the agent of the publisher. Once it's given to the agent of the publisher, then all of that stuff happens on the computer itself because I have to move quickly.
Exactly.
But when it's just me, yeah, I do that on paper. That's a necessity.
That's so funny. See, that's interesting because for this book, I hand wrote a lot of my research notes because that like helps me retain the information a little better. Now I mostly type my notes because I need to be faster, but I had all those little post-it notes and I was writing character and plot stuff and like sticking them on the pages of the research, like use this for this character and maybe this happens and things like that. So I had all my little sticky notes in my research notebook and like flagged the pages and then like went back through and used all of that in my early building of the characters.
Oh, I love that. That's a really cool way to do that. If you're a plotter.
If you're a plotter.
If you're a plotter.
If you're not, then just roll with it.
If you believe in that kind of thing. So, and I think one of the things that I absolutely loved about this book is no character did exactly what I expected them to do.
Yay, well, that's exciting.
So I feel like there must have been, like, I think one year I sent Diana a coffee mug that says "The tears of my readers."
Yes.
And I feel like
normally, by the way, I went to message you about this before because I did a podcast recently. That is usually my go-to mug for any virtual author events. Like if I'm drinking, because you got to have the water. This is a tip. You've got to have some water by your side because your mouth gets dry, especially if you talk a lot like me. And I always have that mug. That mug is like my go-to mug to have because it's like, yeah, I'm very proud. I like to make my readers cry.
Yes, the best.
I envision like many evil laugh moments.
Oh, I send you, you know that scene from the animated Snow White where the queen turns into the witch and is like cackling as she goes down.
Oh,
and, like,
yes.
I send that GIF to everyone. I send that GIF to so many people when they message me about my book. I just respond with that GIF and nothing else.
That's the perfect one to send.
It is. It's just the evil cackle. I love it.
And you in your synopsis, you mentioned, that this is a story of family and secrets, and there are so many themes in the book. There's patriotism and heroism and sacrifice and found family and biological family. And what was there an overarching theme that you hoped would really resonate with readers, or was it just kind of a blend of all of them?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the blend for one thing. But then, I don't know, I think at the core of it, I just really wanted it to be like just kind of the choices people make and how those affect not only you, but everyone in your life and affected by you. And so I think that was the thing I really wanted to put my characters through and to kind of have them learn, because they're making these choices for, their country or their family or themselves or whatever it is. And how is that going to affect them now and in the future, and then other people involved in their lives? Because I think that's something that we don't necessarily consider when we make certain choices, and it's something that we probably should consider, because your choices don't just affect you, they affect everyone. And especially during these tumultuous times when there are choices, not always, sometimes there are two choices and both are correct for different reasons, or both are not necessarily great for different reasons. So there's not a quote unquote right choice. So depending on the one you make, how does that impact you and your life and your families?
It is kind of terrifying to think like
Yeah.
a tiny decision can change like everything, or like this is, it's what, 25 years later, basically.
Yep.
And
25 years.
Oh,
yeah. And how different would her life have been had she done some certain things differently, or made certain choices differently, or stopped at a certain point? And so it's just an interesting question.
It reminds me of the Shakespeare quote, the choices we make dictate the lives we choose, to thine own self be true.
Ooh, yes. I like that.
Not a podcast episode if we can't bring Shakespeare into it.
There we
go. So for you, what was the most challenging character to write?
Oh gosh. Definitely in terms of main characters, Svetlana was harder than Mila, because Mila is just an agent of chaos and I love her. But for Svetlana, it was hard, like just finding the balance in terms of her, making her, I guess, likable enough, not entirely unlikable. She makes some choices that are not necessarily the best. And then just the people in her timeline, Casimir and Vera in particular, just finding the right relationship, between them and her, and balancing all of that was definitely a challenge. I was constantly kind of tweaking those and trying to get into their heads more and figure those relationships out more, especially as the story progresses and there are things that are happening that haven't been revealed yet, but I know they have happened behind the scenes. And, there was just so much to keep straight. And it was just a lot trying to get that right.
Did you keep charts about trying to keep them straight?
Oh, I have insanely long Word documents of characters and where they are at in certain points, but like I literally had like what the reader knows, what's actually happening, like 2 columns.
I love that.
I was like using that to like keep myself oriented, because there's a lot of stuff that gets revealed later, but it's all happening in the months and weeks and years leading up to those points. So I needed to be aware of who knows what are they telling themselves and the characters and the reader, but how are they actually acting and why,
Mm-hmm. I love that. I actually think I would make a very good plotter, because spreadsheets like that make my little heart so happy.
Exactly. I really don't understand why you're not a plotter.
Come on, Michelle.
Come to the plotter side.
We're gonna win you over.
I've outlined once and it didn't stick to the outline very long, because I was like, ooh, but what if this happens?
Just I still will let myself deviate from the outline if necessary, but it just helps like orienting myself right off the bat, getting to know my characters and my story, and then kind of letting the story take it away. But because I've done all that prep, it like just kind of saves me a draft or two usually.
And I love that you bring that up, because so often, because this has been, for those listening, we've been keeping this question going for the last year or so. And we'll talk to people and we'll say, okay, planner, plotter. And they're like, but I can't, can I say I'm a mix of both? Because I put it in a pot, but I let myself deviate. And it's like, that's the thing about the plot, is you have this touchstone, you have this roadmap that you can be like, all right, I'm going to go take a detour. But if I need to find my way back, I have a way to find my way back.
Right. Or if you detour and you stay that way, you go back to your outline, you update in accordance with the detour and how it's going to change things in the future, and you keep cruising along.
Exactly. And one of the things I absolutely love with that is that the vast majority of historical fiction authors, we're definitely plotters. And I kind of feel like in this genre, you kind of sort of have to be.
Right. Yeah. It definitely, I would not be able to do it otherwise.
So much history and so much research that we have to keep track of.
Especially this book. I would have just fallen apart trying to write this book if I hadn't plotted many times.
And I think that also leads to our nerdiness when it comes to research.
Right.
And I say nerdiness with all sorts of love because I've done massive amounts of research myself.
Yes.
But we get there's a high for us when it comes to doing the research.
Yeah.
Digging into very dry books. We're like, oh, what secrets are we going to tell? And like, I was watching, like some of those, oh, Who Do You Think You Are? That show. And they were talking, one actor was talking about his family, and they're like, okay, and grandpa was giving tea to a woman, and they're like, oh, and they tried to play it off, and they're like, oh, he was just giving her tea, he was just getting her drunk. And I was like, oh, because you get into the history and you like know like what they write is not what actually happens. It's like, that tea that he was giving her, that wasn't tea, that was abortion medicine.
Oh my God.
and I said it, I was like, oh, that's abortion medicine. And she was like 15 years old, and he was like, oh, and almost in his 30s. And I was like, and I called it out. And then once they got talked to the historian and they pointed that out, it was like, I actually yelled at the television, I told you so.
Oh my gosh.
And this is how into history.
We just find these weird little things, and then it's just this arsenal of facts that we just have and can pull out when things like that happen, and we're like, I recognize this, I've read about this.
So you know how they do documentaries about movies, like how the movie's made, behind the scenes? I think they should do documentaries about how books are written.
Yes.
So you could just see all of the research. Like, I want to see the chart of what the readers know, what I know. I want to, that just really interests me.
Well, good.
So I think those how the books are written documentaries need to be a thing. Maybe it could just be like an Instagram thing.
There you go. That'd be fun. I'll think of that. I'll think on that. Do a series.
But if they do that, they have to be okay with a number of us sitting around the house looking like we're homeless.
That's true.
It's not it won't be a glamorous documentary.
It's a true life documentary.
Exactly. Showing our chaos, showing us looking like we're homeless. Homeless chic.
There you go.
If we want to be like the Cosmopolitan, it's homeless chic.
I'll take that.
That's assuming that there's no stains on the shirts.
Right.
And I collect coffee mugs on my desk. That's one thing I do, like old coffee mugs, and then I'll bring a whole collection into the kitchen.
Yes.
Here they all went.
There they are.
So maybe some staging will be required, but not
a little bit.
Not much.
No, it's gonna be like a reality show. Let's do that, like straight from beginning to end. I mean, they were already gonna talk about doing a reality show where people were gonna get $20,000, $10,000, $20,000 if they picked up the book. I don't even know if that actually went through or not, but they were talking about it and trying to get authors for it.
Interesting.
But still, that had some controversy, but I think something like this would be interesting.
Yeah. So we call it at the desk where it happened. Something like that, right?
I like that.
There is a series universe.
Yep.
And do with it what you will.
Within every book, when we're writing it, we all have that moment where we break down and crying, like literally tears, going, why the hell did I write this book? Why the hell did I choose to write this book? And I feel like that's going to be a good TV moment.
Yeah.
And they have
that
to
was
do
me researching the Socialist Revolutionary Party. I'm just like, I hate this. It was such a dry book, but I mean, it was so interesting in terms of like the content. It was all there, but I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so confused.
All right, so we've gotten about 40-ish minutes into this podcast. I feel that's enough time for people to have enjoyed a very interesting discussion about the book without getting into spoilers.
Yep.
So if you've listened this far, we haven't really spoiled anything. We're going into spoilers now. So
brace yourself.
From this point on, listen at your own risk.
Stop the show. We're going to give you approximately 10 seconds.
Go finish the book.
Right? Maybe not in 10 seconds, but
go read it thoroughly.
We're giving you plenty of time to find that pause button.
Take notes. to message Gabriella, and she will send back
Yes.
the wicked witch or the evil queen from Snow White
The
cackling at you.
Okay, I think we've given them
All
enough
right.
time, Michelle.
Let's do it.
So many spoilers, but
So many.
Which one was your favorite?
Oh my gosh. I think honestly, just having Vera in the story the entire time and then finding out that she's Orlova and just having her be the journalist writing the articles about herself, that like cracked me up every single time that came up, because she's just like publicizing all this information about this mysterious assassin that nobody knows, and it's herself. And I just thought it was funny.
Like, yeah, she was an excellent PR
yeah, she was all about
for
it.
herself.
She was, yeah. So I just had a lot of fun with that.
It would
And
be
with her as a
interesting to see like her. I mean, she's obviously like a terrible, terrible human being, but it would have been interesting to read things from her point of view. Like, tears of my reader's mug in hand, writing
100%. Yeah, because I had to
writing
do
her
a
own
lot of
articles.
like her, because so much of what she's doing is happening off screen. So it's like she's out interviewing someone. I'm like, no, she's not. She's killing people. So I had to do.
That just clicked for me.
That's why she's the
She was
journalist, because
not
it's an easy excuse for why she's gone so much. And so so I had to do a
well
lot
played.
of work in her head, and a lot of her scenes between her and Casimir that happen off screen. I had to write a lot of those scenes because I had to figure out their relationship and like what was really going on and all these other things. So I did end up doing a lot from her and his point of view. That's obviously not in the book. But just figuring out what the heck was going on with my what the reader knows and what the characters, know charts. So
yeah, no, that was I had a moment where I picked up the book wrong and it fell open, and it fell open to the scene where Vera was saying her full name.
Oh,
and I was like,
like, wait a second
with that, Michelle. You've got to be careful. That
spoiled yourself.
I
know.
Oh, but we've talked about this before, how we are the type of people who will look up spoilers on TV shows before we get to them.
Right.
Just because we want to see how it gets, we want to see the mechanics of how it got there.
Yeah.
So, but that was still, for me, I was even out.
Did you suspect though? Like,
no.
Are you serious? Oh my God.
100%. No, I did not.
The whole time I'm like, it's totally her.
It's so funny because sometimes we put in stuff that we expect people to get in the book, and then they're like, I totally didn't get that. And like,
I know it's satisfying in a way, but it's also so fun though to go back and read when you do know everything, because you know everything.
No, I thought there were a couple chapters early in Mila's scene where I thought that her grandmother was actually Fanya.
Yeah, I honestly, what's funny? I was going to do that. I wasn't going to reveal her identity until you get to the reveals of who's who, because I wanted there to be that discrepancy of, is she Svetlana or Fanya? So she was going to be living under a fake name, and so it didn't help you at all with who she actually was. And but then I just needed something stronger to tie the stories together earlier, so I identified her right away.
But the grandfather, I
did not identify him.
Just knowing, I think, and it's like really late in the story where Mila says, oh, by the way, I know my grandfather isn't actually my grandfather. Right. And I was like, wait.
Like, wait a second.
So that was one. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for like toying with my emotions like
You're
that.
You're so welcome.
For 400 plus pages.
Yeah.
One of the things I have to say that I really enjoyed about the book is the fact with the dual timeline set up like this, when we think about like the Russian Revolution, we think about it being so far back in time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then you have, like, quite literally within the early part of the 20th century, it's World War I, the Russian Revolution. And then you have like this, it's a very tumultuous early part of the century.
Right.
And then you have this 10-year break where everybody's just off having fun. And you have the Great Depression and then World War II.
Yeah.
And it's very tumultuous. And just, you know, going and being able to connect those dots, I think is something very similar or very important that I think historical fiction is able to play into.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because you don't think of them as being as close as they were between World War I and World War II and the Russian Revolution, but it was all just like boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, that was something that people would point out to me, because it was the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and then you had Napoleon and all the struggles with Antoinette's sister and Southern Italy. And so when I talked to some Italian podcasts and people who were familiar with like this globalism stuff, they were just like, it never connect, like historians were like, or some of these historians were like, I never connected this all happened like all within the same time period. And it's like
crazy.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, in one life, you know, Svetlana saw all of that.
So many things. Yeah, lots and lots of changes. And she's only like 55, I think, by the time we meet her in the 40s.
And that's a lot for one person to go through.
It is. Yeah. So she was fun. I don't know if that's the right word, but interesting maybe. Because there is a lot that happens in her life and a lot of choices she makes that impact where she is in the 40s. And so it's just interesting exploring all of that.
And it must have been so hard for her. Like, she must have been so proud of Mila for wanting to like join, you know, to resist and fight, and you know, for her just to see that, you know, that fire in her passed down to her granddaughter, even though she had zero involvement in her mother or her life. But just to see that tension of like, I don't want you to go down this path because this is what led me here.
Exactly. It's such a catch-22 for her because, like you said, she gets it and is proud of it and is proud of Mila for wanting to do the right thing. But then she sees how her own choices have affected her. And then she's also still trying to protect everyone and knows, you know, if Mila gets out there and gets mixed up in all of this, something could happen that jeopardizes, you know, the pact she's got with Vera at this point and the agreements they've made. And so she's constantly has that in the back of her mind, but at the same time, like you said, recognizes why Mila won't give it up and why she's so passionate about that cause. And then there's like one little scene where Mila comes home and Svetlana's like listening to the radio and is like, wait a second, like, why is she paying attention? She doesn't care about this stuff. And she does, like, she still cares a lot, but just knows she can't. And so it was interesting, an interesting dynamic between the two.
Yeah, I really enjoyed reading their relationship, but I did miss like young Svetlana. Like it was just really heartbreaking. Like young Svetlana, like how you know, she was so feisty and outspoken, and to see her like, and that's another reason why I thought she was Fanya for a while.
Yeah, right, because she's a little more mellowed out and angry. So yeah, it's like a lot of that has dulled in a sense, but then is kind of still there, just in different ways.
And how satisfying, and we're really going to jump to the end here. How satisfying was writing that final scene between Vera and Svetlana, because that was like 30 or 25 years coming between the two of them.
It was so long coming, and it took such a long time to like get right, I felt like, because it's a lot of reveals packed into like a number of chapters and series, because you've got all the reveals between Svetlana and Vera during their confrontation back in the 1918 or whatever that was, and then you jump forward to the 40s where you as the reader know all this history already, and Mila's finding a lot of it out for the first time. And then you're connecting all the dots of what have led to this moment and finally getting that confrontation, like said. And so it was definitely good, and I enjoyed doing it because just between the two of them, there is a lot of history, obviously, because they did form a genuine friendship in a sense, even though Vera was always, one step ahead of the game and had ulterior motives. But like for Svetlana, that was a real friendship for a time, even though they started off in a place where they don't like each other and they don't get along, and Vera doesn't trust her, and all that was real. And then end up at a place where they do get along and in her mind become friends. And there is a big part of Vera that does care about her and want to protect her in her very twisted, messed up way. So having that final confrontation and having Svetlana finally get to like shed the shackles of silence basically for all these years and face her and get that final moment of justice or retribution or both was definitely fun to write, and I think good for her, and I'm glad I got to do it.
I was very sad though to see Casimir play out the way he did. Like first for not standing by Svetlana.
Mm-hmm.
Even though that one, if I had been paying more attention, I probably could have seen that coming in a sense, because he is so committed to his cause.
Yeah.
But you think, oh, they love each other.
Yeah, they're gonna work it out.
It'll be fine. They have fundamental difference of opinions on so many things, but
it's gonna be great. Exactly. Yeah, that was a relationship that took a lot to get right, because at first he was like terrible and there wasn't as much about him to sympathize with, because like I kind of wanted him to be a very clear-cut jerk, and then I was like, well, maybe I'll soften him a little so we see why she actually is into him, and sympathize with him in some ways, but in other ways he definitely was so committed to his cause, as was she, and there were just those fundamental differences of background and experience that just kind of show that it's never going to work, even though they're both trying to push past that but can't push past it enough because their priorities are with their parties. And so it's just too much keeping them from getting over those hurdles in order to build a good relationship. And so it's just really not one from the start, no matter how hard they try. And then, like you said, when it comes down to it, he still won't choose her and she won't choose him. They're going to choose their parties.
Yeah, I don't know how many times I was yelling at the book going, oh my God, can you get over it? Like, she left her family.
Exactly. Like, get over it. And he just won't and can't get past that mentally. And then when he switches party allegiance, obviously that's the kiss of death.
Yeah. Oh, there was so much. The last, I think, 150 pages were just constantly being going, oh
yeah, you're like, wait a second.
Oh my gosh.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
So now that this book is out in the world, are you drafting or plotting something new already?
Yes, my third book is going to my editor in hopefully a couple of weeks, if I can ever finish reading it through from start to finish, because I've done the edit and I'm just like going through one more time to clean it up and get it ready to go. So yeah, book 3 is almost to my editor.
Are you able to share any details on it, or?
Yes, I can share a little bit. This one is kind of a departure from what I've done before. It is inspired by my family history. So my dad's side of the family, both his parents were first generation Lebanese Americans. One is from New York and the other was from Mississippi. And they met after World War II. They both served and met through mutual friends. And they exchanged letters in 1946 during their courtship from New York to Mississippi. And so we actually still have all of those. So my dad gave those to me and I read through all of them, and kind of basically this story is a fictional story inspired by them and their lives and one of my grandfather's sisters. So it's a fictional story, post-war, set mostly in Mississippi, about a Lebanese American family.
Love that. I'm very excited to read that.
Thank you. I'm excited. It's been fun doing something different because I don't have this backdrop of war going on, you know, to fall back on and help with my plot. So it's just a lot of good family drama.
Gotta love the family dramas.
We love it.
Yes, I'm getting ready to embark on writing a family drama, and yes, I love being able to do family drama stuff.
So fun.
Must be a little more freeing because there's not as much there may be research to do as far as like era or location, but not political parties.
Freeing. Yeah, in terms of research it is, but in terms of story, I've had a harder time with it just because it's like I said, you don't have anything big and dramatic to fall back on. Like I can't just randomly throw them into a battle and, you know, have stuff happen. It's like, well, now what do? I have to come up with some sort of conflict that's not because of what's going on in the world necessarily, but because of what's happening between the families. So in that sense, it's been a different kind of challenge.
That's when you step into my world of pantsing and
exactly
and see what happens.
We're just gonna let the characters take it from here.
Well, everyone, if you have stuck through the spoilers, if you're like us and you want to know spoilers, but now you want to see the mechanics of how everyone got to where they ended up, you can always click on our show notes and order your own copy of Daughters of Victory at our bookshop on bookshop.org. As always, bookshop.org supports our wonderful writers. It supports the podcast, but most importantly, it supports all the wonderful indie bookstores out there. And Gabriella, you're going to have to come back for book 3. Like your family.
Totally. Yeah. I was going to say, we're just going to make this like an annual podcast appearance thing.
Right. Well, we'll see you in 2024.
There we go. See you then. No, I'll see you before then. We're going to start the What's on Your Desk series. So I want to be the first.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay, yes.
You're the co-founder of What's on Your Desk podcast.
Yes.
And I wonder, it might be fun if we did like picture. I don't know if necessarily.
Oh, maybe authors could like send us pictures of what's on their desk and we can share
it. I know
during
you look
the
a
month.
little afraid, Gabrielle.
I'm like, what do I need to remove from my desk? Like, I don't have a corkscrew here. I don't have a corkscrew on my desk. What are you talking about?
It's okay. I have a Mickey coin stopper.
Yeah, that's so cute.
It's all good. It'll work.
It's all good. You never know. Writing's stressful.
This is a judgment-free circle.
Exactly.
That's right.
It's all part of the writing process.
Yes, I love it.
Well, thank you so much for making time for us tonight, and we'll see you again.
Absolutely. Thank you all for having me, and I'll see y'all next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.